Hello, vinyl community. This is Tommy in North Carolina, and I'm going to make a video today on what I would call oddball music or oddball records. Records that may guarantee that you clear a room out if you put them on at a party. Now, before we get too critical about any of this, I'm not saying this is bad music. This is just not very mainstream type of music, and so this stuff isn't for everyone's taste. Some of them just... You'll see as I go through them, but some of them are just completely off-the-wall, nutty records. But most of this has music on it that I quite enjoy. The first one was inspired by Headley, a vinyl community member, who is another fat bearded man talking about records, who I've been enjoying his videos quite a bit. He recently got a package from another vinyl community member, James Griffith, the vinyl professor, whose videos I also enjoy. And it had in it a Laurie Anderson record, and he mentioned specifically this album, Big Science. And this is an album that featured maybe her one and only hit, Oh Superman, which is quite interesting. It's very computerized, synthesizer type stuff. Laurie is a performance artist primarily, more so than a musician, who was married to Lou Reed. And she put out quite a few records in the 80s, and like I said, they were more about performance art than they were traditional type music. I love this stuff. It's quite interesting to listen to, but it's definitely not for everyone's taste. And so, Headley, here you go, Big Science, the album by Laurie Anderson. And I encourage you all to check out his videos. Now, the next one was one I could not pass up, and you may have seen this album in some of the... bad album covers books if you're prone to read those. I love those books, and they're good for family get-togethers and things. But this is John Bolt, Julie's 16th birthday. Now, the cover of this is quite disturbing, and I want you guys to get a good look at it. And when I got this record, it was still sealed. And, you know, and there's probably a reason why. From what I gather, John Bolt is a Louisiana artist, a country artist. He looks a little bit like country singer John Anderson there. But the album cover is quite disturbing because just looking at it, you don't really know what's going on here. You see this older gentleman consulting, who I'm assuming is Julie, on her 16th birthday. There's cigarettes and an ashtray, a glass of, it could be water, but who knows. It is clear, possibly beer, though. There's some suds around the top. Probably can't see that detail. And Julie looks quite perplexed and a little disappointed, and it's just, this is a strange cover because I don't know exactly what's going on. So, curiosity got the best of me one evening, and I decided to crack this record open. And I've only listened to the title track, which is the first song on side A, Julie's 16th birthday. I probably one day should listen to the rest of this thing, but I can tell you what the song Julie's 16th birthday is about. It's a song, it's a typical sort of country song, ballad. And the singer, who I'm assuming is this guy, is he's out drinking at the bar, and his daughter Julie, it's her birthday, and he keeps saying, well, one more drink and then I'm going to go see my daughter on her birthday. So he finally decides, after having several of these drinks, that he's going home to see Julie, to which he's in a terrible car accident, and he wakes up in the hospital and he's dying. He's on his deathbed in the hospital, and his sort of dying words are, well, you know, tell Julie that I tried to make it home. And this is the best part of it, and it's hilariously awful. But the person who he's talking to says, well, you can tell Julie yourself because she's the one that you wrecked and you killed her, and you with your drunk driving. So it's a message song, perhaps, but it's every bit as great as I just described it. So John Bolt, Julie's 16th birthday. The cover does not quite give the song away. The next one, any oddball artist, I happen to love. This is Captain Beefheart. This album is one from the early 80s, Shiny Beast, Bat Chain Puller. Mr. Beefheart did the album cover, Don Van Vliet. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is actually a Canadian pressing, I believe. But Beefheart made a lot of really interesting music throughout his career, and I highly recommend checking any of it out. but it's definitely not mainstream. So imagine a stranger, weirder version of Frank Zappa. So there you go. The next one is one I picked up quite recently, and it's a fun album. This is the Colonels Mandolin Man. The Colonel being the one and only Colonel Sanders. Now, this picture may look familiar because recently there were some KFC commercials featuring new Colonel as played by Daryl Hammond, formerly of Saturday Night Live, and it featured a mandolin band. This is a gospel album, favorite old church hymns recorded by the Colonels Mandolin Band for the glorification of Christ. I actually bought this in Corbin, Kentucky, which is the site of the original Colonel Sanders kitchen, and they have boxes of these things still sealed, and you can buy them as a souvenir. Well, of course, me being a record collector, I had to buy it, and of course, it didn't stay sealed for long. But it is a truly terrible record, I can say that. That one's a bad one. The next one I talked about before, this is an album, Stephen John Kalinick, I'm not sure. This is put out on the Light in the Attic label. This is called A World of Peace Must Come. The reason I got this, I found it on sale. This was in my colored vinyl series. The reason I got it was the association with Mr. Brian Wilson. Apparently, Brian Wilson produced this. It's really more of a glorified home recording, and and you can hear Brian's voice on a couple of the tracks. But it's a spoken word record, and a little more than disappointing, I can honestly say. I'm glad I didn't buy this full price, but this Mr. Kalinick, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing his name correctly, is just reading some of his poetry. Now, the next one you probably could figure would be an oddball. This is actually something I think I got on Record Store Day. This is David Lynch, the film director, who is actually one of my very favorite film directors. This is an album called The Air Is on Fire. It's Soundscape, and I think basically what this is, and I'll read the description here, the experimental sound accompaniment to the director's retrospective at Fondation Cartier in Paris. And so it was available on vinyl as an exclusive. I think it's a limited release. But I believe this is stuff that was playing in the background during an art display in France. And like anything David Lynch, it's truly terrifying. A lot of wind noises and things like that. Nothing resembling music. And while we're on the subject of David Lynch, and some of you may have this or have heard of this, the soundtrack to his very first motion picture, Eraserhead. I think the soundtrack kind of was an answer to Eraserhead. Had kind of built a cult following, and I think a lot of the punk movement really got into this. But this is really just soundscapes and things designed by David Lynch and the sound designer for the film, Alan Splett. And it features, strange organ music and industrial sounds. And a lot of people remember, if you've seen the film, and I'm not going to give anything away, but there's a lady in the radiator, and she sings the song In Heaven, and that is featured on this soundtrack. Just like the film itself, this soundtrack can certainly probably clear a room if you put it on loudly. Now, the next one was a gift of mine, a gift to me, from my friend Sean in New Orleans. Hi, Sean. And Sean knew that he had this album, and I started just admiring it. And finally, I think on my 30th birthday, it's been a long time now, 30th or 35th, I think 30th, he presented me with a copy of Mrs. Miller's Greatest Hits. And some of you know Mrs. Miller is sort of outside music. She had a little bit of a run in the late 60s. It was on Carson. And she was kind of the Florence Foster Jenkins of pop music. She recorded for Capitol and put out a couple of records. There's another one, and I know that Sean's got it, The Country Soul of Mrs. Miller. But this is Mrs. Miller's Greatest Hits. And she does a lot of hits downtown. These Boots Are Made for Walking, Hard Day's Night, Chim Chim Cheree, and so she does it in her unique Mrs. Miller style. Now, I know Mrs. Miller has a lot of fans out there, and she's got a little bit of a cult following, but this record is definitely a party record. And as if it weren't enough, yes, I have the mono and the stereo copy of this. Actually, the stereo is the one that Sean got me, and years later I found a mono copy, and I just can't pass up Mrs. Miller when I see her. So Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller's Greatest Hits. The next one kind of got featured in my Michael Nesmith video, and I kind of made mention of the fact that it was alternative music. This was Michael Nesmith's first solo album, as it were. It's called Mike Nesmith Presents The Wichita Train Whistle Sings. What this is a recording of instrumental versions of several of his own compositions. A lot of the stuff he had done with the Monkees or stuff that he was working on and stuff he had done later. I think there's only one track on here that, there's not a track listing on the back. There was one track on here, I think it's called Don't Cry Now, that I've never heard in any other version. Most of the other songs were recorded by him, either solo-wise. It's on the Dot label, and this is an interesting album because, like I said, someone described this as the first alternative album. I think it came out in '68. The famous story was that he recorded it one night. He had it catered by a fancy restaurant, and the idea was that the whole thing was a tax write-off for him. And so, you know, everybody has these tax records like Exile on Main Street, for example. But this is Nesmith's tax write-off record. It's wild. I call it a marching band on steroids. It features a lot of the Wrecking Crew guys, Hal Blaine and people like that playing. Shorty Rogers, I think, did the arrangements. So it's a lot of heavy hitters, but they're just trumped up versions of Nesmith songs with chicken picking guitar and banjo. So it's an odd mix, and it's something that's definitely makes for strange listening. The next one is an oddball record that certainly deserves its place as an oddball record. This is Having Fun with Elvis on Stage. Obviously, that's Elvis Presley. This was on the Boxcar label, which I believe was a label started by Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager. And as you can see in the upper corner here, it's a talking album only. So there is no actual musical selections on here. This is just recordings of Elvis's in-between song banter, basically. You know, I don't know. Elvis was an interesting guy, and he was a great entertainer. I don't know that he was much of a comedian. So this is kind of presented as a comedy album, and it's basically, like I said, it's Elvis's in-between song banter. But I saw a copy of this for a relatively very cheap price, and I couldn't resist it. Not only being an Elvis fan, but just of curious albums. Now the next one's quite influential. This is Terry Riley, A Rainbow in Curved Air. Now this one I also owe to Dr. Caudle for exposing me to this. This is on the Columbia Gray label, which is usually their classical stuff. But A Rainbow in Curved Air is actually a big influence to Pete Townshend, in particular his synthesizer work. Baba O'Reilly, as a matter of fact, Baba O'Reilly is a reference to Terry Riley, who was more of a modern composer. And so this is what I would call synthesizer soundscapes is really the best way to describe this particular album. I love this stuff because I love synthesizers. I always joke that if I had the money and the time, I would invest in analog synthesizers. And I probably would lock myself away down here and spend many, many hours never coming out, just fiddling with it. I think Pete Townshend called it synthesizer-itis. I believe that's something I would have. So like anything, it's just steer clear of it. But it's fun to listen to. Weird music. Now, my friends in Mississippi, in particular central Mississippi, will definitely appreciate this. This is a sealed record. I've never heard it. I have no idea what it sounds like, so I don't know if it's terrible or not. But this is Jackie Thompson presents The Hour of the 50s. And Jackie Thompson, there he is looking like a radio DJ. Jackie Thompson was a realtor in central Mississippi. Those of us that grew up in Pearl, Mississippi, where I'm from, we used to spend Christmas. Jackie Thompson would ride around neighborhoods in Pearl throwing out candy dressed as Santa Claus. But Jackie Thompson, and he's still living, and he's a well-respected guy. He was a realtor in Mississippi for a number of years. This particular album came out, I don't know what year this was, But here's a little note back here. Jackie Thompson probably has more information in his head about the music of the 50s than anyone. Don't mention a song to him unless you want to know who wrote it, who recorded it, when, and how long it was on the charts. The original hit information on these titles came from Jackie's memory, not from a book. And then, of course, there's a big liner note here about Jackie Thompson. Was born in Pelahatchie, son of a sharecropper. Jackie is, the other thing that Jackie did besides being a realtor was that he hosted a show called Hour of the 50s. It was a locally produced television show, and it was sort of Central Mississippi's own version of American Bandstand, and Jackie Thompson was the Dick Clark. And they came on and they played all these 50s songs. Now, I have no idea if Jackie is singing these songs or what. I just know that it's got a recording facility, Studio B, Jackson, Mississippi. Special thanks to the TV station and whatnot. There's, of course, an address and a phone number. Pearl, Mississippi, personal appearances, record sales. So I don't know if this is him singing these songs. I don't know, but I'm almost scared to open this just to give it a spin. But it's definitely an odd-looking record. And so finally, this is the last one, and this is one I was playing recently, and I remember my wife being upstairs and saying she was quite frightened by what she was hearing. This is on the Third Man label, and this is a record called Why the Mountains Are Black. This is primeval Greek village music, 1907 to 1960. So this is... Greek folk music, and I think Long Gone Sounds is who originally put these out, and Third Man kind of took an interest in it. I'll read you the hype sticker here. Early Greek music ranging from village folk into antiquarian blues music from the diligent archives of Grammy-winning curator Christopher King. When oddity and odyssey collide, the results impress. And, of course, R. Crumb did the cover artwork there, the famous Robert Crumb. And so this is music definitely to crank up and frighten the neighbors. So if you wanted to play it, but it's so interesting and of historic significance. It's a wild record, to say the least. So those are my oddball records. I'd like to see some of you share some of yours or comment about some of the ones that I have. If you know about that Jackie Thompson record and know exactly what it is, comment below and let me know. I love receiving the comments and you guys that are hitting the like button down there. And I've been spending more time venturing out and seeing more and more different videos by different people. And so I'm enjoying quite a bit of them. Of course, I mentioned Headley and James Griffiths, who I've mentioned before. But if you haven't checked those channels out, definitely do so. They're worth your time, and you'll see some interesting stuff with some great guys. So continue watching, like and subscribe. Feel free to share anything if you've got some family or friends that might be interested in what I'm showing on here. And like I said, comment below. And also, if you have any suggestions for anything you'd like to see me do, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. And usually I will show what I'm spinning on those channels. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, Vinyl Community.